Welcome to the second season of the Killzone podcast, real talk for competitive kill team. This is your host, as always, Beeranid 40K. We're kicking off 2021 with the most ambitious undertaking I have ever attempted on this show. The idea was simple. Break out the contact lists, the phone numbers, text messages, just get as many top players and great thinkers as possible and get them to come on to give one top tip each to help you win more games in 2021. This is Jumpstart 2021, and the response was out of this world. While I wasn't able to get everybody I wanted, everyone that I asked jumped at the chance to help the community and lend their voice to the discussion. Some wanted to be here but couldn't make it work last minute because of scheduling, things like that. And, thank you guys either way. Every one of you guys that responded and wanted to be here or made it, you made the time. Thank you guys. Wow, coordinating with so many guests was a heck of an endeavor, but the guests I did get on here are literally among the best players on Earth, all here in one show. This is the proudest I have ever been of this podcast and the hardest I have ever worked at a single episode. And I truly hope that you enjoy it and it helps you to grow in 2021. So sit back, grab a notepad, and listen in as the titans of Kill Team pull back the curtains and share their thoughts with all of us. Welcome to Killzone Season 2, Episode 1, Jumpstart 2021. And now I'm welcoming Mr. Andy, who most of you would know as Glass Half Dead from YouTube fame. He's actually a decent player. He came and dominated in the States, took top 8 at LVO. So welcome to the show, brother. You know what this is about. It's Jumpstart 2021. We're trying to help people win more games. So, my friend, what is your tip?
Hello, everybody. So my tip is, I don't know what other people have said, just to be clear, but my tip is pretty simple. When you are practicing games, you have to practice against yourself. And when you do that, first turn is key. You don't have to play 4 turns. You can play the first turn over and over again. Play the scenario you fear most. I feel like I'm just segueing into a second tip, but it's part of the same one, I promise.
Okay.
If you are afraid of a horde team that gets to go first in the movement and completely swarm you, play that. Go up against your worst nightmares. You can hyper-focus your practice to beat what you are most scared of.
That's actually a really interesting thing. And your tip is basically, first it would be, basically you should be sad hammering. If you're listening to this and you're not, you should be sad hammering, right? And then if you are, what you're actually using that is intentional play to help you kind of problem solve and work out the puzzle before you're in that situation, right?
Yeah, basically. I mean, as you say, you need to view Kill Team as a bit of a puzzle. Mm-hmm. Like, there are certain things that, okay, dice are a thing, but you know that your team is, from a statistic perspective, bad at that one thing. Mm-hmm. So you need to practice that thing to beat it, not with statistics, but with gameplay.
Right. Because, the math is great, but, did you forget to base that guy? And now he's going to, consolidate in that he's going to lock up that gun. Now that gun can't shoot next turn. Oh, and he's, tying up a point, something like that. Like rolling dice and actually moving models is important. And I think more so than people realize, because it is a very cerebral game. There is a lot of, the math hammer kind of aspect to it. But yes, people should be practicing. They should be practicing against themselves, like you were saying. I'm Definitely. A big fan of math hammer. Or not math hammer, sad hammer, we call it, which is playing against yourself. And so how do people do that? Like, how do they sad hammer? What does that look like for you? You said basically one turn, right?
Yeah, so I would give 2 kind of scenarios that you want to throw at yourself. One is exactly what we just said there. You want to take turn 1, because turn 1 is so important. Like, okay, sometimes there are swings and roundabouts, but turn 1 can be definitive. And primarily it's based on who goes first, because that is such a big thing. And that really kind of tells you how the rest of the game is going to go. So consider, look back at your games and think, what's the most difficult for you? If you're an elite team, chances are, if you have to go first, you're going to be kind of screwed. You need to know, okay, actually, I know that if I can be seen at all, he will shoot me off the board turn 1, right? So you need to know how to approach that. You need to know that if you practically just give up turn 1 and keep everybody shielded, can you do that and then go ahead and still win the game, even though you've essentially conceded on turn one, or well, your turn one. You're not conceding on turn one, but you're giving up turn one. So you really need to have a good feeling for that, because saying for a turn, I'm not going to sit on any objectives or get any kills is terrifying. And
Right.
you need to know when you can and can't do that.
That's an interesting point. And I think what another kind of like takeaway from what you're saying here that I'm kind of taking from this is, and it comes back to some things that have been said elsewhere on the podcast, not necessarily this episode, but that's don't prep for the ideal, right? Because this is the real talk. That's what this podcast is all about, is real talk for Kill Team 40K, for competitive Kill Team, and it's kind of like test for that punch in the nads is coming. Like, don't think of the ideal and like, oh, this is going to be so good if. It's like, yeah, sometimes things will go your way, but a lot of times they're not. And what you're advocating for is prepping for the not.
You don't need to prep for things going your way. You're going to win that game. That's not what? That's like, yeah, you don't need to do that.
Yeah.
If things go your way, you win the game. That's how that goes. The other thing I would recommend is you do want to give yourself a bit of a puzzler, a bit of a brain teaser. Because let's be honest, you can only play the first turn so many times before you know it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you're trying to get to. You want to know it. So take, whatever, a faction. Doesn't matter, any faction, and arrange your models somewhere on the board that kind of makes sense, whatever, and then put down the enemy models. You want to be kind of random terrain, random model placements, random grouping, and then pretend it is your movement phase. Okay, and so this is just a way of kind of generating a problem for you. They do this in chess. They will give you a brain teaser, right? And it'll be like, in 3 moves, solve this checkmate. Get check or whatever.
Yeah.
And so do this for yourself. Again, you're trying to be really random when you put these models down, and then sit back, look at your models, see, and then do whatever it is. Give yourself the task of getting 2 models onto 1 objective. Something like that, and see how you can make a move and a charge or whatever you need to do, and then a fight and a shoot to accomplish that goal.
That's really interesting, because one thing that I was doing, I have done what you're talking about where you start first and everything, but what you're doing kind of reminds me of what I had done in the past, which was like set up kind of randomly. Put models down. Like what I used to do was roll for the number of, I'd look at like a data sheet or something, or like a typical list, and I'd roll for like how many of those would be on the board at this state. And it would be like, okay, imagine that this is turn 4. This is the kind of situation you're rolling for, like board quarters. You can do that too. Be like, okay, you cut the board in half, or in 4 quarters basically, and say, okay, I'm going to roll for how many guys are in this quadrant, and you set them up like optimally. Like, okay, he's in cover, he's this and that, this guy's on the point. You do that for each quarter. And what I tried to do was kind of do that for myself. Like, okay, maybe I only have 3 guys or something. How do I get like 5 points this round? Or 4 points.
Okay, yeah.
Let's say like that wins me the game. How can I take myself from this moment to a 4-point swing, which is what I need to win? Maybe that's denying him a point. That could be one of the points there, because that cuts them a point. That's almost sometimes as good as having a point on your board, is denying them a point. So look at it that way too. It's not just what I can score, it's what I can stop them from scoring. So now maybe I've stopped them from getting a point. I only need 3 more now. Something to that effect.
Sure. I agree with what you've said, but I think in my head that's a slightly different thing. Although that is, you should do that as well. But the reason I say turn 1 and then random placements with moves, advance, and charges is because I'm all about you need to know how to move. I'm not really saying go through the fight phase. Who cares? Assume that you roll statistically average and just put a flesh wound on them, right? It doesn't matter if you get the kill. Make sure that you make the best possible movements that you can. So and that can only really be done with being able to read the situation very quickly.
That's really interesting, because you're not only saying do turn 1, you're kind of just saying do the movement phase of turn 1. Like that's
essentially, yeah.
Focus on,
yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
That's really interesting. That's a heck of a
I
takeaway.
I feel like I'd already said that, but you're right. I hadn't said that. Yeah, it doesn't really matter what happens after the movement phase because that's all set in stone.
Hmm.
In the sense that the dice could go left or right, your way, their way. It doesn't matter as long as you have set yourself up. Then you have the best possible chance of winning at that point. You can't fight bad dice; they
Right.
happen. But the movement is all you.
That's actually really interesting because it's like, yeah, it would let you get more reps in because you're not like taking the time to figure out the RNG aspect. You're only focusing on the point of the game where you basically have agency, which is
Yeah,
that movement, which you would have
I mean,
agency with like pile-ins, consolidates, target choices. But when you're focusing on
yes.
that movement phase, you are unwinding the puzzle and you're getting more reps, like say 2 or 3 instead of just one, because you would be practicing with RNG, like, okay, I got to roll the dice, and then this guy's going to do it, and stuff that really you don't have as much control over as just moving. So that's actually really interesting.
Yeah, I would also say there that I mean you do then like in practical terms you do then need to play the rest of the turn out because otherwise you won't know if you made the right moves or not.
Right.
If you could instantly see, oh yeah, I made the wrong moves, then you wouldn't have made those moves in the first place. So you do need to see the impact. But yes, hypothetically, you're correct. You're just making the movement phase, and then the rest of it is seeing, did I make the right move?
Right. It's just like more inconsequential or whatever.
Yeah,
The rest
yeah,
of
yeah.
it after you've done that. A heck of a
That's
tip.
right.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Very much.
Glass. As those of you listening will know, there'll be links in the description. Check out his YouTube channel. Give him a sub. Say hey. Subscribe and join for that double hello, I think is what you give now, right?
That's the double hello, and there's a surprise at the end if you say that long. Yeah.
Woo. All right. Well,
Woo.
thank you so much for coming on, brother.
Thank you very much. See you, everyone.
And now we move on to Mr. Matt Hurl, who has won the Command Point International earlier past year and taken top 8s, some notable events. He's actually also a TO, just an all-around good player, probably one of the best in my opinion. And welcome to the show, brother. If you could give one tip that would help some players be better in 2021, what would that be?
So I think it comes down to the dreaded going first on the first turn.
Okay.
I think everyone in Kill Team hates it, and I think I usually win when I go first.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is you got to go in it planning on going first, which is the first thing. Always think you're going to go first. So where are you putting your guys that when you do your movements on turn 1, it's not going to be completely terrible. And then when you do go first, it's okay not to be aggressive and score as many points as you want to try to. So I think the natural tendency for a lot of people is to you go first, run your guys up into those middle objectives, and try to hold them.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens is your opponent goes and they get their charges or they shoot you, and they wind up not only killing your guys, but then taking those objectives.
Yeah.
And so it's a double lose. And then you wonder, well, why am I losing this game? Well, you just lost a whole bunch of guys, and you're out of position to do anything good next turn, and your opponent's on all the central objectives.
Yeah.
The alternative is hang back a little bit. If you don't know you can survive their counter assault, either by shooting or from them charging you, don't go for those objectives. It's okay. You're going to hold the back objective, which is going to be a point, and maybe they'll score more objectives for you. But if you hold one objective, they hold 2 or 3 or 4, they're still only getting, two more points.
Yeah.
So holding those objectives isn't that big of a loss for you. And since most tournaments you cap out by maxing out on 3 turns, it's okay to not max your points on turn 1. It's easy to make them back up. And if you're putting yourself in places where maybe you're in a good position to shoot someone off of an objective, you're not on it, but if they go on it, you're going to shoot them off of it. Or let them take it, excuse me, and then turn 2, you're in a good place to charge them if they're still on that objective, and if they want to charge you, they have to come off of it.
Yep.
So you're setting yourself up for turn 2. And then instead of being down guys, people out of position, and your opponents are all over the middle of the board, they're only all over the middle of the board. You haven't lost anybody, and you've set yourself up to have a really strong turn 2, no matter who goes first.
Now, what I've kind of noticed is that a lot of that is set up in deployment, right? Because it's like you're kind of like setting up to where it's like, okay, at least in this, where I've put this guy, he can see this objective. I might not get to it, but I have a gun and I see the objective, right?
Right.
And that's kind of the thing. It's like, okay, I can ready or do whatever. He'll move into range, and I'm going to be right here. If I, quote unquote, win initiative, which is often a lot of times, like you were saying, people think of it as losing initiative.
Right.
And there's like a paralysis that gets in. I'm really glad that you kind of brought this up, because it is a thing that I think many players struggle with, and not just newer players. A lot of times I would say like, oh, newer players struggle with this. It's not necessarily just newer players. Some people just really prefer to counterpunch. I'm that way. I'd like to always go second if I can, because it's like I can decisive if I need to or something, and get in that charge or whatever it happens to be to go first. But it's like it feels like more power going second. But you're saying basically it's okay to hang back. Even if they hold 4 more objectives than you, it's only 2 extra points. You still have your one in the back, and you're castled up. You're gonna get them, and there's going to be compensation, right? Because they move up.
Yeah. Or if it's a kill hold tournament, they're only getting 1 point.
Yeah.
Whereas if you had put your guys there, they would have gotten a point for probably holding more, a point for killing your guys, and probably a point for killing more guys. So you've just given them a massive lead to start. Whereas if you just hold back right outside of their charge range, maybe right inside about 11 or 12 inches, you have you're at a really good jumping off point for turn 2.
Yep.
Whereas, like I said, if you just commit everyone to the center, unless you know you can hold it, like if you're only running custodies, by all means, run forward. But for most other teams, you can't survive the counterattack. Either they're going to shoot you off or they're going to assault you off those objectives.
Yep.
And so you're just better off just letting them have the points to begin with, or setting yourself up where you can deny them those points, than being very aggressive. And as an aggressive player myself, it really is, sometimes you got to just look back and be like, why am I doing this?
Absolutely. No, this is one of the most interesting tips that we've had so far. I haven't gotten with everybody yet, but this one, I hope you guys paid attention to at home. And like I said, Mr. Matt here is one of, I believe, the best players in the game right now. And so, take notes, guys. Think about that, because it's a big thing of you're putting yourself out of position and overextending, and there's no compensation for that. Like he's saying, a lot of times you're not even going to get those points because you're going to get shot off of them. So it's like, what did you gain from doing that? A lot of times, it's probably nothing. You lost the guys and you don't have the points. So sometimes, you can play a little bit more cagey. I do like to personally go for as many points as I can, but that's not just positional points, and it's not like unnecessarily. Like I've said a lot with elite teams, you can win by holding 2 and denying 1 a lot of times, because even if you only have 2, if that's more, that's hold 1, hold 2, hold more. So there's a lot to this kind of stuff. We won't try to overload you guys too much here with this one tip, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. Thank you so much for coming on, Matt.
Hey, anytime. Thanks for having me.
And now coming in, welcome to Shane Smith of the Command Point Podcast, who's here to tell us one of his tips. So Shane, if there was one thing that somebody can do in 2020, you're probably one of the best players out there right now. You won a couple tournaments this year. You're always in the top 8s. You're writing the best lists. What can other people do in 2020 to win more games?
So I guess if I had to give, obviously, my favorite part about this game is list building. I think Battle Scribe is your best friend. If I had to sum it up in one sentence, it's Battle Scribe's your best friend. So what I do when I'm looking at like a tournament packet or a format or something, I like to go on Battle Scribe, and I like to make lists and just push and see what I can do and come up with like a victory condition, I guess, for what this packet seems to incentivize, and then build lists for all sorts of different factions, and because while you're doing that, you're not only learning what you might want to play, but you're learning what you might play against, or what you might learn more new things that are optimal that you weren't thinking about before. Does this make sense? What I'm kind of saying right now?
Absolutely, and it makes a lot of sense, and it's something that, like I've talked about before, that you spend more time thinking about the game than actually playing it. And this is kind of like a mental prep. It reminds me like how Michael Jordan used to say, like, I know I'll make the shot when I've taken it 1,000 times in my mind, or something to that effect.
Yeah. And I think even for a new player, this is huge because you are learning what other factions do. You're learning what every model and every faction does as you're pushing, and you're building a Drakari list for the first time, and you know about what mandrakes do, and you know about witches, but then you see like an incubi, and you're like, what does this do? Maybe I can use this, and you start looking at that data sheet.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, like as a tournament, like a competitive player, like if you don't know what 99% of the data sheets, or like what 99% of the models in this game do, then you're not good enough. So look on Battlescribe, build lists, because list building is really fun, and with TTS you don't even need to physically own it. You can just pull it up and play it. But even without TTS, figure out what it is that you want to buy, because a lot of people will just buy boxes, and they'll be like, let's just see what I can do, right? Like they just kind of throw something out there. That was what I did. That's what pretty much everybody does. Like I bought a box of Orc Boys, and
Same. I
didn't know what the team was from that box. If it even came out to 100 points, I knew that I had some boys and some knobs, but yeah, I mean, I just think that Battlescribe's your best friend. List build all the time for fun. It's I don't know. For me, it's fun. Maybe not everybody finds that to be fun, but it's a learning process. It's helpful for just kind of expanding your knowledge on the game and other factions.
Yeah, there's like a few benefits to that. It's like, one, like you said, you're learning what could be out there. Two, you are getting a sense for a few different builds that could work on this pack. Whatever you're coming into, you're seeing like, okay, I have this option, I have this, and then now all of a sudden you have the benefit of choosing one that is better than the others. You have like a cream that'll rise to the top, and that's the list that you're going to take. The other thing is that as you're doing this, you're thinking about things that are doing well on this pack. Kind of something you touched on is that other people are probably going to have similar ideas. And what you're doing by now coming in there and looking at that and then evaluating that as a no, putting that in the no pile, is that you've probably found a weakness now that maybe you hadn't thought about beforehand until you've built that list and messed around, under the hood of this faction, what they can do. So as you're going in, and you're coming into this pack, you look and you say, oh, Death Guard, okay, I was thinking about them too, and this is why I didn't take them. There's a clear reason for whatever that faction. It doesn't have to be Death Guard. That was just something I pulled out of thin air. But there's a clear reason why they weren't a winner to you, even if they were towards the top. And now you know what that reason is. So when they're setting that up across from you, you kind of know what keeps them up at night. You know where the soft spot is to poke your finger into. That they're not going to appreciate very much.
Yeah, the position you don't want to be in is you're in a tournament game and you're looking at your opponent's models and you're asking, what does this guy do?
Yeah.
You don't want to be that to be the first time
that
you run into something, right?
And the sad
especially
fact,
now that
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say the sad fact is that most people that I see a lot of times when they're first getting into this are doing that with their own models.
Yeah, that's the word. You definitely don't want that. But try to become familiar with other factions and in turn kind of become familiar with what your capabilities are with list building. A lot of people, like, they'll be building a team on Battlescribe or something, and they'll just gloss over like an expensive model instead of saying, what can I get if I take this model? Like, what actually fits? Like, what is the puzzle pieces that I get to use, I guess.
Dude, that is such a good point. Like, that is something that I would probably put as one of my tips, is like, stop looking at points, guys. Points matter. They matter. But if you're listening to this podcast, please, for the love of God, stop just looking at points. Just stop stopping at the points, because you first and foremost have a win condition that you need to achieve. You have a job. And if this model is going to do the job that makes you win the game, he's worth that many points. so many people turn their nose up at something like, oh yeah, it's too expensive, this and that. It's like, dude, if it's gonna win you the game, if it's 7 points of the 18 will be scored from this guy, take him. He's worth it. Or like some factions, they are very limited on, say, gunners. I only get 2 gunners, but man, I really need more range in this. Well, guess what? That Terminator that you're turning up your nose at has a gun that he can take. And, maybe that's your 3rd special weapon that's suddenly in this list. Is it the most optimal? No, but you've already got the bargain, price in your list where you could get it. Now it's like, okay, to do the job, I need this other one. Guess what? Now all of a sudden that guy is viable.
Yeah, I mean, like if you're taking a Terminator, and if you're looking at a Terminator and your opponent, is not going to have any AP3, I mean, that Terminator might as well have a 4-up invuln. Yeah. And think about it that way. Like, would you take that model suddenly if you had a 4-up invuln? Probably. I mean, you'd at least look at it a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I guess that just means like certain things are better in certain situations. There's very few things that are just an always no.
Yep.
And you learn those things through, list building and messing around and pushing what you can, I guess, work out in a list, whether it's 100 points, 125, whatever the format. Just, see what you can do.
Yeah, I almost think, to add to that people should experiment in a casual, not even casual, like a prep type situation. If you're playing TTS, what I kind of want from you is to go through and look at that model that you would never take and try to make it work. See, is there an application? And if I did, how? Because then you're going to be broadening your horizons, and it makes your mental muscle more flexible and stuff for what the application of a certain unit is and things of that nature. I think that there's some benefits to that. Because it'll make you better list build.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, because you might go to a faction, that you need to flex more than some others. Some factions just have everything on all the guys. Some don't. And if you're going to this team that's like, oh crap, I really got to make this do double duty or something to that effect, or work with something that's a little less optimal. Here, it's it's doing the win condition, everything else, but maybe there's a bad matchup, something like this, and this is the best it'll get. Now you have some exercise in that area.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
A lot of people, their New Year's resolution is to get fit. Well, this is kind of like getting fit with list building. You're practicing and working out with that thing. Strain yourself a little bit with list building. Push it a little harder.
And then the last thing that I always say, when you are building your roster, don't get too caught up in matchups. Build for T3 and T4. That's what I like to do. Toughness 3 matchup, toughness 4 matchup.
Yep. And I used to build for all the situations that I possibly could, and since I've started stripping it down, I have noticed I'm enjoying things a little bit more. I'm not deliberating quite so much. I'm more able to know like when to take something, because there's not so many options and everything. Like people can get like paralysis from that too. I noticed. It's like, okay, sure. Well, like I have to take this against this, and then that. But if this also takes this, then that guy comes out, and then this comes here, and then it's like you build this amazing roster that has so many things in it. A week or two goes by until actual tournament time, and dice rolls, and it's like, oh crap, what do I do again? It gets to be too much sometimes.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah. Anyways, guys, so that was Shane from the Command Point Podcast. Link, as always, in the description. Check them out. They're on Spotify, all over the place where you can hear podcasts, as well as YouTube. And they also have the Discord channel where we play our games, Command Point Discord, and that will be a link as well. Come play some tournaments with us. They're some of the biggest tournaments that have ever happened in the history of Kill Team, and you can play them in your underwear at home. So thank you so much for coming on, Shane.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we move on to Danger Fro, who just took second place last month at the Transatlantic Open tournament on TTS. So, welcome to the show, brother. What is your tip?
Thanks, bud. Yeah, thanks for having me. So essentially, one of the best things you can do in like mid game is there's always going to be points in times, especially with the map that we're on now for like WWL, where you're going to have to kind of make a choice of who's going to get shot and who's not. And in that situation, you need to try and like make your opponent choose who they're going to shoot. I don't know, make your opponent choose the one that you want them to shoot at. Usually the easiest way to do this is like put your leader in like a spot where they can get shot at, but make it like, you know, where they're in cover and then the whole thing, and they're like usually only hitting them on fives. If you're Drukhari, you know, you have your Night Fiend, you usually make it so they're hitting on sixes. And even with other models that are just hard to push though, like it's good to have, like even if you're an elite army, it's good to have a model that you don't really care about, which is hard to do in elite armies. And because, you know, every model counts because they're always so expensive. So if you can afford to like put a model in that you don't care about and then put it in a position where your opponent has to deal with it instead of shooting your more important models, you're usually going to end up being in a better spot.
That's really interesting. So it's kind of like, because I talk about the honeypots, like the objectives on the board, as like knowing where somebody's going to go and things like that. But it's interesting because what you're talking about kind of reminds me of like in chess, that whole poison pawn concept of like like so much of the games that we play is based on fear or greed, like motivating the players. They're like either trying to escape something and avoid it or earn something, you know, maybe at a cheaper cost or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And so that's why it reminds me of that poison pawn, because like in chess, if they take that now exposes them to something else. And so what you're doing, I guess, is reallocating the opponent's resources for them or something like that.
Yeah. It's a lot about, because a lot of my personal game theory is based off of watching a 40k player named Skari. And he always has the method, and he plays Drukhari as well. Like that's his main army too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and his big thing is like never play the game that your opponent wants to play. Play the game that you want to play, and if you can, force your opponent to do it. Sometimes it doesn't work out like that. You know, either you get bad dice rolls or anything like that. Kind of like what happened with me in the second round, where I wanted to, like in the very beginning, turn one, I wanted to advance all my dudes up into his space, so that turn two we'd be in a better position to like charge on his dudes and like make some stuff actually happen. But I only rolled I rolled like ones and twos for all my advance rolls, so it didn't really happen. I ended up having to be not nearly as far up as I wanted to be. Which in that regard is kind of why I left my leader out, because I knew that he would shoot at the leader first instead of other stuff. And he'd pretty much be hitting the leader on sixes. And, you know, it's a gamble, but when you're in a situation like that, you kind of have to take that gamble. And you want to be able to set it up in a way that fits you the best.
Yeah.
You know, don't let your opponent play the game they want to play. Play the game that you play.
That's interesting. It's like you were saying, the risk versus reward aspect, but it reminds me also of like one of the things I try to stress is predict the future by creating it. And in that way, that kind of reminds me of what you're doing there, is you are kind of saying, these guys over here get to live because I'm going to set this guy up over here to take maybe some shots. And then these guys now get to do what they want to do. Something to that effect. Awesome.
Yeah.
Man. Very, very interesting. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on, brother.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
And next we have Mr. Matthew Fong, a.k.a. Micromancer, who has risen to fame in the TTS tournaments as of recently, taking first place last month at the Transatlantic Open. So, Mr. Micro, if there was one thing that you think would help a player in 2021 to get more from their games, have more success, what do you think that would be?
I just think there's so much information out on Discord right now. Like, you have access to all of the best players. Just reach out to, like, if you're learning a faction, find out who's winning with that faction and reach out to them, get some games in with them, and find out what they're doing. If you want to play with the best, you should practice with the best.
Yeah, that's never been easier, actually. You know, we're all on there. You can go find everybody pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone's super open. Like, don't be nervous about it. Like, I don't think there's anyone who's really, like, holding much back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, everybody's just like, yeah, this is what I'm doing. Here it is. You know, especially once the rosters are out, it's kind of like, I mean, every comp is a little different, but once the rosters are out, the veil of secrecy kind of drops. And,
Yeah.
yeah, and the thing that's cool too is on the Discord, the Command Point Discord, everything is streamed. So like you can come in and just watch. Like you can just come in, mute your mic, and hang out in the lobby basically and watch some games being played, and see what other people are doing with the faction you're interested in.
Right. Like unless your neighbor happens to be like Beeranid, like chances are you're not going to be getting like world-class practice wherever you are, right? So
Hey, thanks, man.
it's it's just so easy right now to get those awesome training partners.
Yeah.
And everybody's like super willing to play with you. It doesn't matter how new you are.
Yeah, and it's interesting too the variety of factions that are out there. Because it's like every comp, like we keep saying, is a different kind of a meta that springs up around it, and so we see pretty much every faction here and there being messed with by some very good players. Like we've had Shane running Gellerpox. You're doing guard. You were doing Tyranids for a minute there. You're also known for your Heretic Astartes. It's like so many people are running different factions that you're bound to see something interesting that you care about being run on there. Yeah, that you can kind of mimic. Very good, man. Thank you for the tip. That's a really good one.
Of course. Yeah, thanks for the call. I hope all your listeners have a great year.
And moving on now, we have Alex Squires from LVO Top 8 fame. In fact, he was only, I think, 1 point away from winning LVO. He's also one half of the Strategic Advantage YouTube channel, which if you're starting out, hey, this is a new year, you're trying to get better, that's a great resource. As you guys know, there'll be a link in the description. They have a Kill Team 101 series that'll help you with the basic fundamentals and moving through, and it's worth it to look at fundamentals because basically the rule book, you read it, and then there's little things that you forget. And how do I know that? Because I see in chat rooms and forums and all this stuff, hey, what's the answer to this very basic question that's right there on page 62, or something to that effect. And this kind of a resource is really good to go back and watch, because some people are just going to be more visual learners, and maybe the rule book didn't teach them the same way that a video would. So welcome to the show, Mr. Alex.
Thanks for having me.
So the question I'm asking everybody is, it's 2021. If there was, you're a great player. If there was one tip that you could give somebody to help them in 2021, what would that be?
So I've beaten this drum before, and I'm going to beat it again. I think the tip for getting better in 2021 is to play weird games. And by weird games, I mean play games outside whatever tournament structure is currently active. Play games from the core rulebook, from the elites book, from the Kill Team Annual. These missions, they're not balanced. If you're looking to be a tournament player, know that they are not balanced, and that's the reason they're not used in tournaments. But playing these imbalanced games forces you to learn improvisation, and also in roughly 50% of imbalanced games, you're going to be playing from a disadvantageous position. So if you can learn how to play out of a hole and pull all the tips and tricks you can think of to try to dig yourself out, that's really helpful. And when it comes to a tournament game, when you inevitably find yourself in a bad spot, you're used to playing out of it, and you'll have a little bit of a background to help you out with that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because it's like you're not always going to be in a winning position, and you're kind of training for when that moment hits, which is probably one of the most important kind of moments to know how to work around, right? Is when it's like the game is lost. Can you pull that back?
Yeah. One of my favorite games I've ever played was, we were playing, I think it's one of the Astartes missions from the annual. And essentially I was having to assault a temple that was defended by a whole bunch of eliminators.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out that's really hard. I was doing things like charging plasma into eliminators to keep them from shooting, and sitting there with my pistols on my infiltrator shooting instead of charging in. It was a wild, wacky game. I'm pretty sure I won it by a couple points. And I'm pretty sure I did. It was a down to the wire game. But it was one of those games where, I figured things out. I became a better player in that game by playing a weird game that was not balanced in the slightest.
I never thought about it in that way, but it's funny because one of mine is that way too. The very first tournament I ever played, it wasn't a roster. Kill Team had just come out, and the store was basically treating it like Big 40K, and they saw it was like a 20 model list, so they said make a single list of up to 20 models, and just do what you can. And it was a core rulebook mission, the one where you run off the side of the board to win.
Yeah.
And I was playing against Harlequins, and so it was just like turn one, man. They were right there, and I was like, I swear to God, if I had recorded that game, people would be like, like, I am not worthy, like that on the like that Bill and Ted like on the knees. I think it is like the fanning that they do or whatever. It was like that was the game where charge cycling was born, which is a term that I use for like charging somebody who's already in combat to keep them locked and falling in and consolidating. Like that was it for me because I had to lock these guys down, and it was not going well. It was like, okay, I have a Lictor that just gets one-shotted in Overwatch to a fusion pistol and things like that. It was just insane, and that game taught me a lot. And that one game of asymmetry basically changed how I play this game forever after, and has been like the source of a lot of things I've talked about, like in the Tyranid Tactics videos, things like that. Like, what am I doing with charge cycling? It's that. It's like keeping somebody in a position.
Yeah, it's like if you're doing resistance training or something for physical activities. You train in a position that's harder than that which you'll actually be competing in.
Yeah.
So then when you do get to the competition, you take your training weights off and you're like, oh man, I'm strong.
Yeah.
And then you do good.
Yeah, it's funny because Glass was saying like you don't need to train for a situation where you're gonna win or whatever because you're already fine. So yeah.
So just to spin out a little bit more from that. So 2021 will be a wonderful year, I hope. And it'll hopefully be the year of the vaccine. And so I think that will also help with the idea of playing imbalanced games. Because 2020 was the year of TTS. It had to be. There was no other option. It was the only safe option. And TTS is wonderful to let us do our hobby online, but there are wonderful content creators who have made the maps and things that we use on there. And I'm so grateful for them. But just by its nature, it's not the easiest to set up weird maps with weird deployment zones and all sorts of things. People are working on it, but it's not the easiest in TPS. So once we're able to get back and we're all vaccinated and we can play safely in meat space, I think what everyone should do is play these weird games with your buddies, in a backyard mass, if we still need to be that level of safe. Hopefully one day in 2021 back in our FLGSs. But yeah, play weird games in meat space when you can do so safely. That's my big tip for 2021.
And like I've said on a few of these guys, this is one of the, in my opinion, the best players playing the game right now. So take notes. If this is something that has helped him to get to that top level, because like I said, almost won the largest Kill Team tournament at that time. He was like 1 point away, and then there was some technicality stuff to that. So he basically was there, and is one of the best players. So thank you so much for coming on, Mr. Squires. It's always a pleasure, and I wish you a very happy 2021.
You too, dude, and to all your listeners too. Stay safe, y'all.
So now we have the other half of Strategic Advantage, Mr. Emmanuel Mitsanikos, who won day one, I believe it was, of the SoCal Open. So welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me back. It was day two, actually. But,
day two, that's what it was.
Way.
Yes. The most important day.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I'm in the middle of a move right now, and I have a fancy display cabinet at my new cabinet at my new place, and I just put my trophy in there with lights and everything like that, and I just sat and stared at it for a few minutes, remembering that. That was a fun time. Seems like decades ago.
Yeah, man. Yeah, but welcome to the show. It's
Thank
so
you.
today's episode we're talking about, if there was one tip a good player could give somebody to have more success in 2021, what would that be? So, Mr. Emmanuel, what would that be?
Yeah, so this is a big thing for me, actually. It's teaching the game. If you've ever been over to our channel, if you haven't yet, I encourage you to. Not you, the listeners. I know you've been there, Chris.
Yes.
But but we have a whole segment, a two-whole playlist actually, it's purely dedicated towards teaching the game. And both Alex and I feel very strongly about teaching the game for two big reasons. One, teaching the game brings more people into the hobby. You teach someone how to play, you inject into them your enthusiasm and your hype for this game, as well as your competitive edge for the game and how you teach it. And that just grows the community. Not only grows in players, but also in competitive players as well. And in teaching the game, not only do you impart that knowledge, but you also solidify it in yourself. On one of your Killzone podcasts that you had the two of us on, all we talked about was fundamentals of the game. And fundamentals are the nuts and bolts that let all these crazy rules interactions and all these exploits, all these tactics, they're all based in the rules in those hardcover books, those softcover books that we have. So teaching those to someone else, I can't even tell you how many times in teaching this game, I'll think about something. I was like, I never thought about it from this angle. Or the person I'm teaching will say something to me, ask a question that I had never considered, that then snowballs into a whole new kind of tactical decision that I can make at the high level. So teaching the game it's a twofold way of not only growing the hobby, but also growing yourself as a competitive player.
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like having the channel has taught me a lot, because it's like you'll read it,
Yeah.
you'll play it, and then that's also that extra level of mental reinforcement, I guess, of like creating that neural pathway, like how that information is stored in the brain. It's just that other way of now. It's like, okay, I have it, but can I transmit the information? And it's an interesting thing, like, because for example, another weird thing, I've played guitar a lot of my life, but I was self-taught, and recently, found out that my young son was very musical, and it was like, wow, I am not a good teacher at this. It's like it is a skill to teach, and it's like, dude, I have to go back like so long to think about, well, what was I doing in the beginning and things like that. But yeah, it's there's a lot there to unpack. I think some factions people will probably have better success with, than some others. Like I found that Gene Stealer cults was kind of hard to learn with at the beginning. It didn't have the same safety net that certain things did. But in general, you can teach anybody how to, how charging works and pile-ins and consolidates. And, you should have based this guy, because maybe, now I wouldn't be able to get in on that point or trap that gun from your charge, being able to use what you just used to try to beat me against you. Things like that. There's so much that you can do with teaching and like little bits that you can impart to people. Every aspect of the game, has something.
And a little bit of peeking behind the curtain. One of the biggest motivations for Alex and I making the channel and making all these Tactica and tutorial videos was specifically for teaching people in real life. Someone comes into the LGS and they say, how do you play the game? It's like, okay, well, I'm finishing this game. You sit down for 20 minutes and watch our videos, and then we'll come back to it. And it's all about having a good resource that can help teach this game, but then also sitting down there and drilling it out with your new hobby friend. The other added benefit that I actually forgot to mention is that it also helps you learn factions that you're not familiar with, because oftentimes someone's going to roll up with 1,000 Suns army and say, I bought these minis, I want to play these. Can you help me learn the game? You're going to have to learn their rules back and forth in order to help your friend teach your friend how to play the game. And there you go. Now, all of a sudden, you're an expert on 1,000 Suns.
Yeah, and that'll help you in your competitive thing, too. It's like you get your local game store stuff, and, you're prepping for a match you didn't know you were going to have to play sometime.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, brother. It's been a pleasure, as always. And again, you guys, check out the link in the description to the Strategic Advantage YouTube channel. Lots of good stuff there.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Okay, now we got Mr. Paul Jay Mardesic. You guys know him in the Discord as Sitch. He's one of the world-class Necron players that kind of put him on the map with the Litch Guard and the Novak Flayed Ones kind of mixed together at 125, hold kill especially. And he's here now to kind of give some tips, hopefully on, how you can emulate some of what worked for him in the past, things like that. So welcome.
How you doing? Everything's good?
Yeah, man. Doing good.
Can't complain here either. So looking forward to this series that everybody's talking about this kill team. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, man. The response has been just overwhelming. Like everybody that I asked either like did it or wanted to do it, but then had like a last minute scheduling conflict. Like nobody just said no. I got to hold all my secrets to myself.
That sounds good. This community is good. So
yeah,
I expected nothing less.
Yeah, man. Best community. So what you got, man? What's your
Well,
tip?
I was thinking, you hit me up the other day, so I was thinking, and what I want to convey is that I think people should be in kill one, hold more, especially, that the injury roll is way more important than people actually pay attention to. And I think a lot of people understand that, but they don't take it to their lists. I think especially in melee Necron builds, melee Space Marine builds, you need to be bringing multiple damage weapons. Single damage weapons in melee in a kill one, hold one format is just not there. You run the risk of running into bad rolls on your injury roll and them being able to tie your guys up and fall back. Mm-hmm. I think you need to delete models. Every single time you need to have delete models when you're in melee. You cannot afford to have that guy survive and fall back and then your guy's stuck there.
Absolutely, because it's like that's half of the win condition, right? In that format,
1,000%.
It's like you got to get lucky, right, as part of the win condition. And how do you take that and make that something that is now in your control and not just up to the dice gods? It's deliberately choosing weapons that point at that win condition. So in those
1,000%.
formats, absolutely, dude. In those formats, it's like you gotta, you go from a 50-50 on an out of action to a 75% chance of an out of action as soon as you add that second die. That's
gigantic.
Gigantic. That's huge, and it's like we were saying, it's part of your win condition. So yeah, man, definitely.
Yeah, that's the reason why I played Tau at San Diego. What was that? SCO.
SoCal. Yeah.
Oh, so yeah. So I played Tau there, and I was playing completely different. And then all of a sudden, everybody started we changed the rules, and I just kept on going back to Necrons because they have of course the six on the 6 they regenerate, so they have that whole jankiness on the injury roll, and then they have the Litch Guard, which nobody was using. Like people were like, nobody was using them. I'm like, why are nobody using this unit? And I just fell back to like these guys are so good because of the multi-damage weapons and then the jankiness on the 6 on the regenerate. So I just think that when you're especially going melee lists, I know there's a lot of good melee lists out there that could run single damage weapons. I just don't think they're viable in a kill one because of this whole thing.
Yeah. So
we tested it, me and my group of buddies, and we just knew that Necrons were at that point. There's some differences now, but at that point they were the best melee team that you could field.
Yeah, and people should listen to that too, because like your play group, if you look at you and your main practice partner Anthony, you had kind of pushed for the Novak Necrons and stuff kind of before a lot of other people were, and then he was doing that the Drukhari heavy the Mandrake heavy Drukhari, and those emerged to become like the big bads for a little bit, and still are, dude. Even we're doing hold again temporarily. Those are still nothing to shake a stick at.
Yeah, I mean, because like we say that kill one, kill more, or kill one, hold more, or whatever format, 50% is that injury roll. That's completely true. You're also helping your hold one by deleting models too. Yeah. So it's not like you're just going for one side of the equation. Like those hold one more, like the pinks and all that stuff, they're only working towards one type of win condition. This one's actually working for both. It's interesting. It was a really fun thing to play. I think they're better in certain formats, the arena and stuff like that. But depending on, they're really map dependent, I think. But I think in generally speaking, that the injury role is not taken. They're just not as it's just not taken as serious as it should, I think.
Yeah. No, there's something there, dude. Because I mean, they just like do it. Like I just saw it's 100 points, but the guy was still running 3 Necrons today and drunk after a few beers, ran that and beat what was the #1 ITC player last year. Just like dude, Necrons and like you said, the killiness. Like they get in with a flail, it's like, well, a CP, a couple CP for a decisive or something is just going to remove that model. And that's like, what do you do against that?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on, brother. It's a pleasure, as always. Happy New Year.
Yeah. Happy New Year to you, everybody, and I'll see you guys soon.
Coming to us all the way from Spain, Mr. Kill Team Granada himself, my good friend. He's basically one of the best players in Spain. John Sao, welcome to the show, buddy.
Hi, guys. First of all, let me apologize for my English. I'm from Spain. English is not my mother language. So, yeah, if I pronounce everything by mistake, I'm sorry.
You sound good to me. So, it's a new year. We're looking for tips from a really good player, and you're one of them. You're one of the best over there on that side of the world. What can somebody do in 2021 to win more games?
Okay, the first thing is to play a lot. I guess almost every guest you have having say the same. So obviously playing itself the best way to get better. But a thing we do in our club is do something after the games themselves. After playing, trying to see where you have made a mistake, which one were the good plays, something like that. A recap after the game, for example.
So after the game is played, you're saying talk to the opponent kind of and see and think about what you could have done differently?
Yeah, that's it. We speak in round 1, you should have done this, or I must have done this one, or something like that. It's just like theory crafting, how the game would have been if taking different decisions. Obviously, the roles have the roles. We can fight against the goods of the dice, but how can I say it? Some decisions, do we just recap them to see where the good ones are, where were the bad ones?
Yeah, so don't think about the dice quite as much. Just think about like the decision making, right?
Yeah, that's it. Blaming the dice is not the result. Some games, obviously, the dice are very bad.
Yeah.
But mostly it is obviously a dice game. So there are rules. But yeah, the decision, especially movement ones. So I mean, the move ones are for me the most deciding. Moving good. It's obviously not depending on rolls.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the advanced rolls maybe, no, but
yeah,
actually getting right into one cover, not exposing too early, and something like that are diceless, for saying that way. And those decisions are for me the greatest ones.
And that's an interesting tip too, because it is something that we see a lot in the game. Is people, they'll lose and they'll say, "Oh, it was because of the dice." And it's kind of like, well, you brought a list that depended on those dice. Like Tau, one of the things that makes them strong that I talk about a lot, might even have talked about in this podcast by the time it's done, is that, Tau, with those drones, you're actually playing positional and you just get to roll 54 dice that turn on top, just icing on the cake. It's not that needed to happen. If I roll hot, that's great. If I roll nothing, that's okay too. because I'm already winning on the positioning of that team. So it's a very important thing to build teams that aren't depending too much on the dice if you can. And if you do, either way, we're all depending on the dice at the end of the day. Try not to blame them too much. Still try to think about what you can do to win, right?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, the roles are the roles, but especially movement, I would say, it's getting good in positioning. It's you have the winning hand if you position good.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, dice are a thing, but don't blame them. Still try to look for ways that you could have done something different, what you could do next time. Maybe it's a different list that's not so dice dependent. If the dice are making you lose, maybe make a new list.
Yeah.
But great tips.
Obviously, there are some times where you are going to hitting on twos and you fail, or being a sniper and rolling them with a double one. Yeah, shit happens.
Yeah.
As it says. But yeah, usually the post game we do is just recapping those decisions that were good, which ones were bad decisions, and trying to recraft in the game after that. And obviously learning from those mistakes and trying in the next game to make new mistakes, not the old ones, but new ones to trying to learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, there you guys go. From one of the best players on the other side of the ocean, Mr. John Sau. Thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome. Thank you for giving me this option to speak.
And also, for those of you listening, John Sau has a blog. I'll put a link in the description below, and you guys can follow it over and check it out. He covers kill team events from all over the world, not just Spain, not just what's going on here in the U.S. That's sometimes all that people get to see, but this is pretty much there's a lot of coverage over there, right, John?
Yeah, I have pending to cover out actually the bats.
Mm-hmm.
That was the Bay Area bat on TTS,
mm-hmm.
and actually the Tau too, and right now it's playing the Worldwide Open too, and I will try to get a recap and some kind of the top list and something like that. And from Ibericon, that's the package that is being played in Spain.
Mm-hmm.
I have an Excel file with all the results from the 28 tournaments we have hosted here. And maybe in the next week or 2 weeks, I will do a recap from the meta here in Spain too.
And that's it's valuable to players because as they're wondering what is strong, your place is kind of a resource where they can see what is doing well repeatedly, right? If there's like a team that's doing better than anything else and it's doing it in multiple comps all over the world, then that's something to kind of pay attention to.
Yeah, well, actually, we have to take the data, this info with some measurement, and isn't a very big sample for taking hard decisions or hard data. But yeah, I think it's good one. The pointy ears, the elves, the three kind of them here in Spain are mostly dominating. Asuriani, Drukhari, and Harlequins,
mm-hmm.
three of them. So, except for the Harlequins, maybe I think in the rest of the world, both Drukhari and Asuriani are very good.
Yeah.
So it's not surprise.
Yeah, there you go, guys. If you're listening and you want a tip, play Asuriani or Drukhari. You'll probably do well in 2021. If you weren't playing those, you'll probably do better. Thank you so much, John.
No problem. Actually, with the previous one, Asuriani and Drukhari I think are very good because precisely for the move. They move a lot, so the position is very good, and I like positioning a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Absolutely. That's one of the things we call it action economy. Like they're moving in the shooting phase. This one guy is doing two things, of movement where the Space Marine is only getting one. And there's a lot of teams that have that. Tau can move in the shooting phase with a tactic. Imperial Guard have an order to move in the shooting phase. So, they may be positioned to shoot this guy and he just runs onto an objective or something or hides. Something to that effect. So it's a very powerful technique or tactic to leverage and it's actually available in a lot of teams. But Drukari and Eldar just have it so readily available to them.
Totally agree. I really love the fade away.
Mm-hmm.
It's shoot and fade. It's just fantastic.
Yep. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's a pleasure to have you. We'll have to have you back sometime.
Thank you, Gary.
And coming up next, we have Mr. Alec Berryman of LVO Top 8 fame. He's always seems to be in the top 8s of everything. Welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, good to be here. How are you today?
I am doing well. Thank you. Thank you. Happy New Year.
You too.
So it's 2021. It's the new year. What I'm asking everybody is if you could give one tip, or maybe a couple tips, couple ideas to somebody who might help them win more games in 2021, what would that be for you?
Win or lose, always ask your opponent for feedback. I've learned so much just after the game, saying like, "Hey, what could I have done better?" Or often I'll say something like, "Oh, like this particular unit, this particular move was particularly tough for me to deal with because of whatever. What could I have done that would have made this more difficult for you?" Or something like that. You just get your opponent talking and learn something from them. This does a couple things. It resets the social dynamic. It's no longer about who won or who lost. It's more of a discussion of equals. You certainly get the different perspective. You thought a lot about your list, but probably less about their list. And long term, people are going to pick up on this. You're fostering a community about improving, where everybody talks about what they did, what worked, what didn't work. And it's less about winning and more about improving. And I think playing with a community that's focused on improving is going to make you better. So that's what I think. I don't know. Have you received any good information in a post game discussion?
Yeah, I am. I'm just kind of laughing. I have actually. I'm just laughing a little bit because I remember watching a stream of you one time, and you just wiped the floor with the poor guy, and then afterwards you asked him, because you do. He's giving these, for those of you listening. He's put into practice what he's preaching here. He does this after every game, and the guy was just like, I don't know what else you could have done different. It's just so savage there. But yes, some of the best feedback I've ever gotten, is that's for me. It's something that I do a lot too, and it's something that has been one of the funnest parts of the game. It's almost like the post-game breakdown has been some of my funnest moments, where you're there and maybe you had a spectator watching on the side or something who's now chiming in. We get that a lot with Discord, but it does happen in real life as well. Somebody who's watching from the side, maybe a couple buddies finished up their game at a tournament or something. It was last round. Now they're watching you, and now they're going to see, say what they saw. So yeah, there's always interesting stuff said at the end. A lot of times anyway.
Yeah, I remember particularly at SoCal back over a year ago now. I had 2 games back to back. I think I played with you, and we had this really interesting discussion about breaking and about leadership and all that. Mm-hmm. I learned a bunch from that, and it just like how much you had thought about it. It was like, oh wow, like if I want to play in the big leagues, I need to think a lot more about Kill Team. And then I went on from that, and I played against it's Michael Holy, who has wins just about every tournament he enters, and his advice was around don't put too much stock in being able to open a door. You'd be surprised at how often the door doesn't open. And I did the math afterwards. It was something like if you have two tries at opening a door, it's something like 10% of the time you won't make it open, mm-hmm. and just the amount of thought and practice that went into figuring that out and being aware of that, like just like getting this like back to back of these 2 good players, just like, oh wow, like I need to prepare so much more. It was not just the answer, but sort of the context of the answer that I thought was really interesting. So those are 2 that I would think of in particular. Yeah,
it's interesting too, because some of these people, like I had a coaching client, kind of jokingly say that he was playing against people that's all they did was play Kill Team. And it's funny because it's almost not that far off, right? It's like when I'm not doing something else, I'm thinking about Kill Team. This is my only hobby. So, if you've got other people like that and you have a chance to ask them a question, maybe they have some insight, that you didn't think of. Like one thing that Holy said, I don't remember who it was to, but he said something about stop shooting guys that you already have a flesh wound on. He's like, you're putting wounds into this over here and this, that. Like a lot of times people will tell you how to beat them next time around and stuff if you're kind of putting what Alec is saying into motion. They'll kind of tell you what you could have done, so that next time, hey, maybe it's not them. It's that's your local player that told you that, and then you go to a GT or a major or something out of town, you play that same faction. Well, now that guy had already told you what to do in this situation, maybe something like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That happens to me in between every tournament. It always helps without fail.
Yep, absolutely.
So one second tip that I would put out for your listeners who have I guess have really want to practice. Get a chess clock. Now don't go play a game with a chess clock. Don't like try to rope your friends and your opponents into actually learning how to play the chess clock. Chess clock it gets really complicated. But you on your own, when you're playing against someone, when you're playing against yourself, something like that, keep the chess clock. You operate both sides of it, and just practice switching between whose time it is, and thinking about what you need to do when you need to switch. I think this was one of the things that helped me the most between SoCal and LVO.
Mm-hmm.
I think I did markedly better because of it. There are a couple things this does. One is that, Beeranid, you know this. There's so many decisions that you have to make in a tournament. You're just overwhelmed by like all these choices that you have to make. The more you automate and just get it into that muscle memory. Okay, it's the start of round one. Someone's going to decisive move. I need to make sure, and then am I going to do it? Are they going to do it? And then move on. Asking them about reactions, just getting everything down so that you don't have to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Really frees you up to think about what you're doing in the game, as opposed to, like I forgot to decisive move that last turn, or I really wanted to, or I should have, or something like that.
Yeah.
The other thing it does is, I always feel like before this, I felt like I was rushed. Like if I wanted to take some time to think about what I was going to do, especially in the movement phase, I was always very self-conscious about that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, you've played with horde teams. If you have 10, 12 models, 15 models on the table, you're trying to move them around. You feel that pressure to like, I got to get through all this. I don't want to hold up my opponent. I don't want to feel like I'm slow playing or anything like that. But there's sometimes that you really need to stop and think. And watching the chess clock and getting a sense of what's a good amount of time and really getting that feel for it. That really helped me. I think I had a reputation for playing quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't necessarily have a reputation for playing thoughtfully. I think there are two differences there, right? But just putting everything into muscle memory and then giving myself space when I needed it to think.
Yeah.
And still feel like I was being responsible and playing on time. That really helped me.
Yeah, and it's a verifiable marker for self-improvement, right? If you're running a 20 model list or something and it used to take you 15 minutes to do a round, then all of a sudden, after a little bit, it's only 12 minutes. It's like, wow, that's an improvement. And that's, like you were saying, I think that's a big part of the game, is just viewing this as a self-improvement exercise more than anything. Like, am I better than the last time? Am I better than last week, last month, last year? Things like that. And having the clock is a tangible way to know that. It's not just blindfold throwing, darts or whatever. It's something that's measurable that you can look to.
And it's also less dependent on the random aspects. I mean, like tracking your win-loss record, like that's really hard because maybe your dice just go bad one game. Maybe who knows.
Mm-hmm.
But figuring out where you're spending your time is something that you can control and you can improve on, independent of any of the random aspects of the game.
Right, because sometimes you're going to go to a tournament, and even though it's a tournament, you're going to run a list with like 4 or 5 crisis suits in the roster for fun, and it's kind of like you need to see, like, am I still improving here, even and measuring that maybe in a way that isn't just wins and losses, because maybe that list isn't going to do as good as some others that are out there, but you can still be improving.
Not naming names.
Yes, no names shall be named. Nobody ever ran 4 crisis suits in a major, ever. Who would do that? But yeah, great tip, brother. Thank you so much for coming on, and Happy New Year.
Hey, you too.
Next guest we have Mr. Zero Stride, one of my favorite thinkers in this game. The person that I go to when I need a little kick in the butt, when I need a paradigm shift. He always has these kind of profound tips that he gives me, and lucky to have him on the show today. Mr. Zero Stride, Happy New Year. Welcome.
Hey, thank you very much. You too.
So what we're doing today is we have one simple tip from good players all over. If you could help somebody to have more success in 2021, what would that be?
My tip to have for more success, winning more games, is very simple. Play more games.
Okay.
You need to go out and you need to play games. You need to play old friends. You need to play people you've never met before and make new friends. You need to, get in the car, get on the bus, get on the train, maybe get on a plane. Hopefully we can all do that safely at some point this year. But go out there and play more games and play new people. It's literally the only way to win more games is to play more.
Yep. Yeah, there's something special about getting out of your local meta, going to a new place, getting your butt kicked, and then taking that information back. Because you only have so much, when you're from Middle America, you only have so much available to you that you're going to get to play against and things like that. And you really get exposed to a lot of different teams, factions. Like a lot of times, the first time I'll ever have played a faction was at a tournament,
Yep. Or the first time you see a faction really played in a way that you didn't at all expect.
Right. Yep. Yeah, but there was something, it reminded me of Bruce Lee, how he talks about a lesser trained boxer beats a better trained martial artist a lot of times, because while one is studying the philosophy of fighting, the other one is in there dodging kicks and throwing elbows and stuff. So I don't know how true that actually is, but it makes a lot of sense, and it seems like it would go over to Kill Team, right?
Yeah, I think so. There's really only so much theory can teach you, and sometimes you have to go back to the theory after you've taken a few punches and approach it in a new light. So I think that's absolutely correct.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as always, brother, it was a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a good one.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
And now the moment we've all been waiting for. This next guest showed up out of nowhere and ended up taking a top 8 in his first ever major that he played. And this wasn't just any major. It was the largest Kill Team tournament that has ever happened, I believe, at the time and since. Welcome to the show, Mr. Benji Riley.
Hey, don't shortchange me. I was number 3.
That's not bad for your first tournament, man.
Yeah.
Well, Happy New Year. Today's episode is basically going to good players and asking if you could give one tip to help people win more games in 2021, what would that be? So, Mr. Benji, what's your tip?
All right. So first of all, I hope you can catch this on camera or audio. That's me cracking a beer. My tip's going to be a little bit different than most people's, I'm sure.
Okay.
I'm like the elder statesman, not in experience, but in actual age. I'm 36. I've gotten to the point in life where I'm just like, man, could go any day. Life's about having fun. So that's my tip. When you play Kill Team, man, it's a game. It's a dice game. One person's going to win, one person's going to lose. But you're not going to win every single game, and you're not going to lose every single game. Don't be a salty loser. Don't be a salty winner. If you are losing every single game, listen to everybody else's tips, because they probably got way better tips than mine. But my tip is slam 6 beers before the game, have some fun, and if you play Necrons and you don't win, if you win but you didn't use Mind Shackle Scarabs, you didn't really win.
Yeah, and that's actually, it's funny that you would say that, because like if you're looking back at your last year's performance and it wasn't that great, what I would honestly suggest is give me a month. This is like the drop and give me 20, okay, of the podcast right now. Give me a month of running nothing but 10 flayed ones. Go just in TTS, something like that, and run like a game a day, game every other day, something like that. Come into the Command Point podcast, link in the description, and run 10 flayed ones. Don't worry about a roster. Don't look at Litch Guard. Don't look at the ranged options. Just 10 flayed ones, people. And if you're not getting 50-50 wins with that, you're not ready for co-piloting, something else. Like, you're not ready for a fighter jet that has all these. There's too many buttons with reserves and maybe psychic powers and this and that and counters and I have to bring this they're going to bring this, so I have to have storm shields and any of that. You're not ready for all that if you're not able to take 10 flayed ones and do decently well. So starting here at the beginning of the new year, if you're looking back and your win rates were not great, just put in that rep. Just give me 1 month. You don't need to do it forever. You don't need to build a team and dedicate yourself. It's not about do you love the fluff or not, anything like that. Just mechanically put yourself in the seat of a team that really doesn't have too many options other than advance, charge, door attempt, and get those fundamentals in there. Pile-ins, consolidates, getting onto objectives you probably weren't supposed to get onto. It has the safety net that is going to let you figure out, oh, was I making a mistake here? Was this a good move or a bad move? And I was just T3 and got blown off the board before I could, cause that's the thing. Before you get to know if you had a good decision or not, something goes bad, they get a 6 on Overwatch, and as a T3 faction with a 6-up save or something, you're just dead. If they just look at you wrong, you're dead, and you don't get to find out, was this a good decision, a bad decision? Is it a good list, a bad list? Am I just in a bad matchup? Any of these kinds of things. So, yeah.
So I want to piggyback off that just a little bit. I've been playing for probably 6 months now, and I'm still learning. Like every single time I play Beeranid or Micromancer or Shane, like the best way to learn is jump in, get in the Discord, jump in just non-ranked games with experienced players. Everybody here is like super happy to help, and just help you get better. And one mistake I think I made early on is I started just swapping factions before I like mastered one.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important to kind of understand a faction completely before you try to start jumping around. I mean, it's not bad, but if you want to be good, if you want to play competitive and win, I think that's a key factor. But the biggest thing is just jump in there, drink your 6-pack, play a bunch of games, and you'll definitely learn. So.
Yeah, that is a thing that I've struggled with too, is just bouncing around too much. Like anytime that I've mained a faction for a period of time, I end up doing really well. Like, okay, I'm going to just play Astartes for a little bit. It's like, oh, you look one day and you're number 1 in the world. Or like, Tau, just been playing Tau for the last little bit, and it was like, boom, my ELO ranking just shot way up, So yeah, but what's interesting about Necrons? I feel like if somebody plays Necrons for a month, it'll teach them more about playing Space Marines than if they were brand new to the game and just started playing Space Marines. As weird as that sounds, you know what I mean?
100% agree. I agree. I actually picked Necrons because I listened to a bunch of podcasts and I kind of looked at it. They're super simple. They have 10 points, 15 points, 20 points, 25 points, so you can make a 100-point or 120-point list really easily. And they're going to teach you the basics of the game.
Yep.
Fight phase, shooting phase, Mind Shackle Scarabs phase. That's my favorite phase, if you haven't noticed yet.
Yeah.
Last tournament game, I think I was cruising to a win, but I still Mind Shackle Scarabs because I wanted to win by blowing his plasma up.
You wanted to flare. Yeah, it wasn't good enough just to win. You had to make it hurt.
If I lost because of it, I still had fun. That's my point. Have fun with it, guys.
Yeah. But yeah, so those of you guys listening, just to kind of, rein that in, recap it. You're come in, do a month of Necrons, and then pick a faction and stay with that faction. You're dialing in the fundamentals with Necrons. You're making sure that it's not, a core book issue, a fundamental issue that you have a problem with. You're taking a team that if you know how to advance and charge and, decision-making skills, you're going to win a lot of games with. Then you can move on to another faction and you just stay with that faction for a little bit. Just stay with them. See what you can do. As the packets develop and things like that, try to stick with it and see what you can do, as the meta might shift. Like, okay, right now it's WWO. It's 100, hold. After this, maybe it's going to be Ibericon again. Who knows? 125, hold, kill, hold. Something like that. Stay with that faction. See what you can do. But start with Necrons if you can.
I want to give one more tip.
Okay.
If you would have caught me earlier in the morning, I wouldn't have drank as much and I wouldn't have talked as much. But
it's like 10 in the morning.
Yeah, it's
he's
noon
40.
here, Beeranid, you judgy judger. Okay, here's what I need to get better at. Okay, in fight phase, I get so excited to roll my dice to hit, right? So I just completely forget to pile in, consolidate. I don't even know which one's which, right? But you watch Micromancer and Shane and Beeranid and all these top level players, they're which one's the first one? Pile in?
Pile in, yeah.
They're piling in, so if they get the kill, then all of a sudden they have the ability to consolidate onto a bounty token or something like that, or onto a objective, right?
Mhm.
Whereas lately I've been just, hey, I'm rolling my 3 hits, I'm re-rolling because I'm Novak and whatnot, right? So before you roll your hits in the fight phase, just take a second and make sure that a pile in won't set you up for some more points or something like that. Yeah. That's me pretending to be smart. Suck it, Shane.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, guys. One more time. Play Novak Necrons. Flayed ones only. 10 of them. Give me a month of that, and I think your game will improve. And then, like Benji said, just have fun. So thank you so much for coming on, Benji.
Future WWO champion. Unless I lose this game in like 10 minutes, which I probably will. But I'm going to mine shackles in it, I promise you.
And now moving on, we have Mr. Alex Rutnerick, or we all call him Alex the Kid, famous LVO guy who came in, to the saloon just out of nowhere, walked in from the desert, and cleaned everybody's clock. Welcome to the show, brother.
Hello.
So it's 2021. We need a tip from a great player. What can somebody do in 2021 to win more games?
All right. So the tip that I have for players that are just like looking to win more matches competitively is it's mostly just to be prepared for your matches. And what I mean by that is like for each game that I have upcoming for like tournaments, I do my best to schedule matches against players who run the faction that I'm up against. And I like to play different people because everybody plays differently, obviously. And just to get that kind of like new perspective and then talk to them, oh, what do you think I should have done? From your point of view, should I have tried something, like tried different things, just so that I'm familiar with the team before I enter a match with that team. And I think it's important to know the strengths and weaknesses of each team that you're playing. And you can really only find that by actually playing them. As much as like staring at the data tables and like looking at sheets and everything can help, you really don't know how they play until you get on the board with them and actually run a game. And so I think that knowing like the strengths and weaknesses of a team, knowing how a team is going to win, whether it be positional or being super aggressive and then contesting your points, that kind of stuff, is like super important to winning matches against high level players.
That's really interesting because like what you're saying, it's true because like two people can run the same team, but somebody is going to run them completely different. Like I think that like for example, I played Tyranids for a long time, and then coming into Tau, I realized that their drones do the job that a Hormigaunt does better than a Hormigaunt. And so people here, they expect this shooting army that I'm playing, like I'm charging with Tau, and people are like, what the heck? It catches them off a lot of times. And so yeah, it's really interesting to kind of see like all that a faction can do that maybe you didn't think they would, or they were capable of, or maybe like they do it way better than you thought they would, something to that effect. It's a trip.
Yeah,
it really is.
I was talking to somebody hit me up for tips on playing Asuryani the other day. And like something that we're talking about for the match that he has coming up is if the other person gets like towards your back line where you're controlling objectives, like a suggestion that I gave was to use the heavy weapons platform to charge, because it's got 2 wounds, a 3-up armor save. Like it's like tougher than most models, and if you can use it to like lock enemies up, it'll do better than taking one shot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And but you would never expect a heavy weapons platform to charge, but you just want to be prepared for if this person gets into my back line, or if this happens, how am I going to stop it? And how am I going to adapt in that situation? Not like if it happens, like you're not for sure that it's going to happen, but just in case, like a plan B.
Yeah.
Just like always being prepared. And that's something I noticed when I was at LVO, because there were a ton of Eldar players there. But we all played played a little bit differently. We all had different like little strategies that we used. I think I was the only one that used the Dire Avenger Exarch as the leader, which was different than like what everybody else had. And then when I explained why I like to do that, we kind of like they could see where I was coming from, and then I could see why having a Guardian Defender leader is a little better. And it's just like different points of view.
Yep.
Can help open up your knowledge on a team and make them easier to beat.
Yeah.
Because realistically, a team that you don't know anything about is going to be the hardest team to face, no matter what.
Yeah, and going to your point, what you're advocating really is like if you have let's say that Eldar is going to be the big bad in the pack. You're saying find somebody that plays that team like dedicated, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's because and again, like you're talking about charging with a heavy weapons platform. The thing there is that this person is used to working with these kinds of resources and allocating them in a way that leads to victory. And so like your buddy who plays AdMech, might be able to go in TTS and run them for you kind of a little bit, but it's not going to be the same as like playing against Alex, who's used to running Eldar and had his back against the wall as Eldar once before or something and knows now what to do and what tactic to pull out, because some of these teams a single CP drop can just flip the board state. Wow,
for sure.
I used fire and fade and moved here in this one weird way, and now all of a sudden that completely flipped it to taking hold more away, or getting me that hold 2 which denies you this, and just things like that, like leveraging the board state with this team and kind of what you can expect. It's really an interesting thing.
And that's something that I think Kill Team does better than Big Hammer at is, I mean, realistically, everything that you need is in 2 books. You don't need 3 books per faction, and need to know every tactic and everything like that. It's not hard to get a good grasp on a team that you're playing against, and you can be able to practice really well against them. And that point that you brought up, playing somebody who dedicates their playtime to that faction is really important, because that person will know the little intricacies of that faction, like how hard or how much a certain model can take in hand-to-hand, or how survivable a model is, or if you can trust a certain model to get a kill in a scenario. Like that's something that a player would only know just based off running them more. It doesn't matter about like the stats so much, but like if you can trust a Dire Avenger Exarch leader to take a beating from X amount of guys, and still stay standing at the end of the day, that's really something you'll only find out just by playing with them more.
And another great tip from a great player. Happy New Year, brother. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, Happy New Year to everybody.
Next up, we have a good friend, Luke Siana, one of our local boys, who took co-third with me at SoCal Open, actually took third both days because he went and did it again the next day. He won an LVO pod. He was number 1 last year for Tau, if we recall correctly. Just like a really good guy. He's always not only doing well, but he does well with different factions, I've noticed. And so it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome. Happy New Year, Luke.
Happy New Year. Yeah, it's good to be on.
So what we're doing here today is we're just going, it's 2021. Everybody's getting in the new year and trying to help people have the most success that they can. And you're always doing good. Is there some kind of a tip that you could give to help other people in 2021?
Yeah, so mine is probably a tip most people probably don't even think about, but it's I call it the pre-tournament mental state, and it's something that I found myself doing a lot. I used to compete in various different games, other than just Kill Team at a competitive level, and it's something that I picked up just through kind of all that experience. But the idea is that you do a lot of the mental preparation for a tournament before you even show up, so that when you show up, you're prepared and you don't have to do as much on the spot thinking, especially in Kill Team when you're trying to pick rosters and secondaries. It can be a little overwhelming trying to do that. Like, sit down, you have 5 minutes to do all of that, make sure your math is correct for your roster, all that fun stuff. So my tip would be kind of coming prepared before that. And so that goes everything from like one of my suggestions is obviously read the tournament pack beforehand.
Yes.
And then read it again.
Mm-hmm.
And then probably read it a third time.
Yep.
That way you know exactly what you're trying to do, what each of the secondaries that they have on there. Also go through those secondaries and figure out what are ones that your army does really easily, what are ones your army can not do at all. Like I, as a Tau player, any of the killing stuff in melee, I just totally ignored those.
Right, like cut apart,
and then
for
also
example.
have kind of
Yeah.
And then also just kind of knowing what are your ones that you can go to where it's more opponent specific. And so kind of especially if you have the tournament pack ahead of time, going through and kind of I went through and I probably take this to an extreme, but you can take it however you want. But I went through and pretty much had all of my secondaries picked for each of the different tournament maps.
Absolutely.
So that each round I knew what I was taking. Another thing that's really good is knowing your army inside and out. For Tau, the points on it is really funky. So when you're trying to like swap, when you're trying to like do your roster, I had all my math pre-done. So it was like if I want to take out, or if I want to put in a stealth suit, I need to take out X amount of points, and that can be divided in these different ways. That way, you walk in there and you can do your rosters a lot easier. You don't have to do the math. You're not getting stuff wrong. You can kind of the best thing for me that I found was trying to do as much of that in the moment mental prep beforehand.
Yes.
So that when you're at the tournament, it is a lot easier, because then you're thinking more on a higher level of strategy, where it's like, I don't have to think how many points is my roster. I can think, okay, I'm going against specifically Space Marines. I can look at their roster. I can see what they're doing, and it's a lot easier. I've already thought ahead of time. Oh, maybe they might go more of a swarm army. Okay, these are probably the units I would want to take. Like, you kind of think through all of that ahead of time. And then a big thing that I did was I asked the tournament organizers if I could bring a notebook, and they said yes. So I wrote down all of these notes that I thought through, so that in the moment I could just flip to, okay, I'm playing a Necron player. All right, I'll flip to my little Necron notes. I wrote down what are some of the gimmicks they could pull. You want to keep most of it like kind of loose, like I would say, like more with an open hand instead of like a closed fist.
Yeah.
Because obviously, it's not always going to work out that way. But giving yourself tips and tricks that so they don't catch you off guard, and kind of doing a lot of the mental side of things before you even get there.
Yeah, and I would second that, because you only have so much bandwidth, right? If you're getting in there and you're expending your mental energy on things like, oh, I got to pick my secondaries and this and that. Like, dude, you look at LVO. That was like 3 pods, I think, that first day, and then 2 or 3 the second day, and then or something like that. It was like the GT, and then the next day was like 3 matches or something. Like, you will die. You were playing like 12 hours a day of Kill Team. You will just like your mind will be mashed potatoes.
I think that whole mental thing really helped me for that, because I did everything. I competed
in
all 3 pods, the big LVO, the one after, and I was still like ready to play even more Kill Team after all of that, because I wasn't killing myself mentally in the tournament now, and I had some pretty close matches. So it wasn't like I wasn't pushed, but also just making sure for tournament stuff, like obviously make sure you get rest. Like I always brought like a banana or something for like middle of the long day tournaments. Like it's those little things that you don't really think about until you've been to a couple tournaments that help a lot in kind of keeping your mental state the best it can be throughout the entire long tournament.
Yeah, because it's like you have to assume that you're going to do well. Like, you've got to go in there with that mindset. And what that means is you're playing like perhaps 2 rounds more than anybody else, and it's already like a 4 or 5 round comp. So that could mean an entire day extra sometimes, like all kinds of things. So you got to, think about as much as you can. And it's funny because I never really heard other people putting it this way, but I almost did the exact same thing before. When I was like really, when there's moments in time where I'm just like severely like gonna push at this event, I go through and I will print off a few packets. And it's interesting that you said notebook, because I did the same thing. It's just that I hid it in the packets. So I went in there with the tournament packet, but inside, what I had done is I would narrow the potential factions that I had in prep, because sometimes, like a month out, 2 months out, something, you have a couple ideas. And so you designate a packet, you print a pack for each faction that you're thinking about just to take notes in and stuff. And so, yeah, you go through with a highlighter and you're like, yes, this, yes, this, yes, this. And then, you cross out what's just not even possible for you. And you can go through and compare like what faction is going to do best there, all kinds of stuff. It's really interesting to track that way. And you just keep it like right there with you, and you can carry that right into your event and be like, okay, this is this mission, this is what I like, this is what I'm trying to do, little notes scribbled in the margins, anything like that, you can do that. And like we were saying, it's not gonna.
Sorry, I almost got you out there. But even for tournaments that they say don't have a tournament, you aren't allowed to bring a notebook. Then you just kind of spend the little bit of extra time and learn how to memorize. Like, there's a lot of different tips and tricks of how to memorize lots of information in little bite-sized pieces. And so it's just finding it takes a little bit of experimenting, but I think in the long run, it ultimately helps your tournament play a lot better.
Absolutely, because after a while you can go in there if you can get it simple enough. You can just be like, okay, well, Death from Afar stacks with Bounty Hunter, and stacks with cut off the head or attrition, like killing a specialist or killing the enemy leader, and I can do that from a point. So I've built my team to stand on these objectives and shoot, and when they kill something, that could be 3 points, it could be 5 points if it was the leader, and I've got my hold here. So it's like you've just built up and said, okay, these are the 3 to 5 secondaries that I like, and that's all you're pretty much remembering and stuff. If you're not allowed to have a notebook or something to that effect going in, you could just like strip it back that way even. But it's all prep, right? That's all going back to what you're saying, is going in there armed with knowledge, because knowledge is power. This is a very cerebral thinking type game. It's not just about rolling dice. That's always a factor, but that's not all there is, or else we wouldn't play it. We'd just go play craps. You could make money doing that.
Yeah. And you can even take it to the extreme of like the longest part of a tournament game is deployment in turn 1. And so for especially SoCal, I had very loose deployment in turn 1 strategies against kind of very generic, like, okay, is this a elite army? Is this a like kind of normal, or is this horde? And so that way my deployment was I pretty much knew what I wanted to do ahead of time. I knew where I needed to position for hiding stuff in certain corners. I had, like, especially for stuff like Arena, where the map is very, very concrete. You can really kind of, we call it the sad hammer of by yourself finding where are these angles, how do I hide stuff, and that way you're doing that all. Your turn 1 goes by so fast, and that is often then your games can actually end, because that was an issue we had in a lot of the early tournaments, was that games would go on for a really long time and you'd end turn 3 instead of turn 4. So just finding ways to take that mental state off.
No, absolutely great tip, brother. Thank you so much for coming on.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
And now one of the ones that I'm most excited for, we have Janice Gillum joining us, who is here top 8 of LVO, tabled me on stream on LVO, killed every bug that I put on that board. She won the Third Eye tournament. She won every pod at Nova, one of the best out there. Oh, she's also happens to be a play tester working, with the development of whatever the future of Kill Team happens to be. So listen up, guys. We have Janice Gillum here. Welcome to the show. So excited to have you. Thank you for coming.
Beeranid, happy to be here.
And happy
excited
New Year.
To be here.
Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year as well.
So what I've been doing is going around to a bunch of great players and asking them, hey, if you could give one tip to the next generation, then somebody who wants to do better in 2021, what would that be? So, Janice, you got a tip for us?
Kind of the joke answer is roll 5s and 6s.
Right.
But not 6s with certain teams.
Yes, with Necrons, no. And then you got to roll 1s on your nerf tests, right?
Right.
Yes.
But seriously, kind of one of the biggest tips for people, and I know even some of the best players forget these, is remember your sub-faction rules or your faction rules. I mean, little things that might seem inconsequential are really helpful. Example for anyone playing any kind of the Heretic Astartes, Thousand Sons, or Death Guard, need to remember Death to the False Emperor when you're fighting against Imperial factions, because it can swing things in a big way in certain instances. Another thing to think of is remember your opponent's sub-faction rules too, because there's occasion where you're like, they can do what?
Yeah.
So going in, you have to be aware of what both sides of the table can do with their specialty rules.
Yeah, you don't want there to be any moment where it's a gotcha, right? Like, even if it's
Right.
not, you don't know every single thing they can do. Like, if you're flipping through the book and you see, for example, fire and fade, that's the kind of thing to look out for. Something that's going to be gotcha. This guy wasn't where he was at the end of the movement phase. He moved more. Something to that effect. Like, look out for those kinds of things. And yes, pay attention to the sub-faction, what you can do and what your guys can do. And then like Death of False Emperor, that's like just an innate ability. It's on all these guys, and people do forget it. We saw that on some very high-level games recently.
Yeah. And we saw it on my first turn with on Worldwide Open.
Oh yeah, we saw the power of it.
Yeah, you saw the power of it with Pius Vorn getting taken out by a lowly Plague Marine gunner.
Yeah, just a one-attack guy who was not expected to do well.
Yeah, and got the 6 and killed her with his little plague knife.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and be sure you always look through their tactics. Like I said, you don't want to get a gotcha moment, because it's kind of what happened to you at LVO with me doing Warriors of the Webway.
Yep.
And dropping 3 fusion guns right in the center of the board.
Yep. Good times.
And then it all went downhill for Beeranid there.
Yes. You can see me desperately trying to claw my way to as many points for the ladder as I could. And you hear Janice apologizing on stream. Like, I'm so sorry. Here's more 6s.
Yeah.
Just rolling more pain and punishment. You didn't even bring in... There was a Striking Scorpion Exarch that you didn't even have to bring in from reserves, right?
Yep. I forgot about him the entire game. And then it's like on turn 4, it's like, oh, I can bring him in now. Oh, no, you have to bring those in before turn 3.
Yeah, just like a 20-something point model. It's just like, nah, we don't even need this guy. He's good.
He was just hanging out in the dirt somewhere.
Yeah,
you guys got this.
Well, Janice, thank you so much for coming on.
Yep. One other thing that I do want to say is, always be sure whenever you're at a tournament, always be sure you're gracious to your other opponent, because I know people, and I've had this happen to me in rare occasions where you go up against somebody that's not gracious or just kind of a salty player, and it can ruin the experience for everybody.
Yeah, it's kind of like a vacation, right? Like, if you're actually going out to these events and stuff, some of these people, they might not be quite there to win the whole event, and so they go up against somebody who might just be there to just check them off a list on their way to top 8, and can kind of forget that that's a human being that's on the other side of the board. Doesn't happen too often, but I have heard of things more than seen it. I've heard some stories about some unfun opponents.
Yeah, and hey, when you go to tournaments and you meet these people, you're going to make some friends for life at them too.
Yep, so take a shower, guys. Take a shower.
Yes, please take a shower.
Yes.
Deodorant is your friend.
Yes. So that's tip for 2021. Thank you so much, Janice.
All right, have a good one, Beeranid.
All right, this is going to be a fun one. We have Dwigged from the Discord, otherwise known as Command Point Sean from the Command Point Discord. Link in the description, as always. He took top 8 at the last, it was the Bay Area Tournament Simulation, using Tyranids. He was running, something that I would hope would work, that I tried and could not get to work, and he took it to top 8, so maybe he'll have a tip that'll help me out. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is really an honor because you are truly how I got started with Kill Team, and I always look forward to your new content, and you're who got me on Tyranids.
Thanks, man.
And as I think I've told you before, that list that you just referenced was just blatantly stolen from you. That might have actually been what
No,
I named it. I stole this from Beeranid.
you know what's funny is you actually were the first one to run as a Gorgon, which I think is almost like mandatory in the modern state of Kill Team. I had wondered about that, but I had took it as Behemoth, and you were running it as Gorgon, which I think because it's like the lictors and stuff, they need that. Like that's your only killy thing, and then when they get in and don't kill, like the lictors, the warriors, the raveners, like they really need. If you're going big bug heavy, they got to do the job and kill. And that's
yeah,
like,
and when it comes down to it, it's a dice game, and sometimes you just got to like play into that, knowing that you're going to have those huge turns when the dice, kind of work out. Even average or slightly below average, it pushes you so far ahead. So sometimes you just kind of need to count on that happening a little bit to lead you to a win when you're at the top tables.
So what I'm doing today is I'm going around to great players. You took a top 8, and I wanted to ask you if you had a tip for 2021. The show's called Jumpstart 2021. A tip that would help somebody to win more games in 2021. What do you think that would be?
So, well, to start with one of my goals, and then like kind of that's attached to a tip would be to play more for the purpose of practicing. And I hear people talk a lot about practicing and I need to practice for our next match, but then that almost ends up just being playing.
Okay.
When practicing to learn or playing to learn can be different than playing to win. If you just try to play for every out to try to win and steal a victory, you might not necessarily learn from that. It might just be kind of the luck of the dice. Where if you are playing for the purpose of seeing what would happen in a specific scenario, that could be more effective in actually growing as a player. And that sometimes means not starting a game from the beginning. Set up an arbitrary board state and then start the game there to see how you would play out of it. Or if you're playing a learning game with a buddy or practice game, don't be afraid to call it after turn 1 or 2 and just immediately rack up again.
Yep.
Or say, hey, let's run that again, but pretend this happened instead. So that playing to get better isn't necessarily playing to win.
Yeah.
You're just trying to develop a specific area of your skill set.
And it's interesting too because I think some of what you're touching on is like the deliberate practice, right? Like you said, You're not just playing to roll dice and find an outcome. It's rolling with a purpose to achieve something other than victory, which will hopefully lead to more victories in the future.
Right, and you may lose that game, but you may have learned something. Like you might have taken a line that you were pretty sure was not going to win, but could have taught you something about that line that you'll be able to pull up later.
Absolutely.
So that's something I want to do, is try to set up more games like that where the purpose isn't to play out a whole game; it's just to practice specific scenarios. But another one that I've been trying more lately is, kind of entering every game with one very specific thing that you're trying to do better in that game. And even like have it on a sticky note, like right in front of you, so that, either one trigger that sometimes you might forget, or, one little interaction that maybe you haven't fully been taking advantage of and you realized, sometimes I forget to pile in effectively, or, before I do my pile in, I need to look at where the closest model is. So if I consolidate afterwards, what direction am I going? So like just being every game, pick one thing that you're going to really hone in on.
Yeah, man, that's like that incremental, I guess would be the word, improvement is a thing. Like if you improved one thing, like a week or something, that could have some very big, outcomes or effects on the outcomes, I guess, later on. Be the way to phrase that. I can speak English. I'm not. Yeah, I can figure this out. I could talk.
Yeah, but I mean, so much of the game is procedural, right? There's so many things to remember that you kind of need to look at it in a big picture sense, and like how you practice and things like that, so that every game you play is a little bit I don't know, you get a little bit more benefit out of it from a learning standpoint.
Yeah, and it's like it's a different attitude, and attitude is so much in this game too. You're going in with this way of thinking and like a goal you're trying to accomplish and things like that. Like when you tell somebody go win that game, there's maybe
what does that even mean?
Yeah, like there's a lot that could contribute to that. But if you tell them, don't forget your pile-ins and consolidates, that is now something they can focus on and could win them that game.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's something you can track. Like you can
Right.
point to exact moments, right, and say this is how many times I did that appropriately. This is how many times I maybe failed to do that effectively. So you can actually quantify that as a goal that you have for yourself.
Yeah,
So
that's a good point too. People should probably be recording their games because you could go back and be like, okay, 3 out of 5, I did it. Let's see if I can go 4 out of 5, or 5 out of 5 in the next one. You could go back because in the moment you might not actually be tracking the exact number that you did successfully, but if you're recording it, you can use OBS. It's a free software you can download and just screen cap your games.
Yeah, and in other games, sometimes I'm watching YouTube videos and somebody's like replaying a match, and they have like a little counter in the corner, and they're keeping track of a specific thing. And I'm sure in a lot of those cases, it's something that they realized after the fact, and then went back and said, "Huh, I wonder how many times that happened." But you can almost do that ahead of time, and I really like that as a spectator, even because it kind of helps me focus on a specific element of the game instead of trying to take in this whole like mess of things that are all happening.
Absolutely.
So having that goal from the get-go, and like even just off to the side, like pen and paper tracking, at the top you write what you want to track and what you want to improve on, and then throughout the game just like note every time that it happens. You can even, like, if you're recording, you can timestamp it for yourself, or at least turn in phase so you can go back and check it out later.
Absolutely. Wonderful tip. Thank you so much for coming on, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And Happy New Year, by the way.
Yeah, you too.
And now we come to the end of our holiday special, Jumpstart 2021, with what may be the best guest of all, the one that we have on here the most, our co-host, that rhymed, Eric Kaczynski, a.k.a. Oodsickle, my partner in crime. As we celebrate this year, this is actually the start now. We're in our second year of this podcast. Mr. Ood, welcome to the show, dude.
Thank you. Some good tips from these other guys here. Been it's only we're 3 days in now. 3 days in, 2 days, 3 days in. I don't really, time is hard. COVID time doesn't make any sense. But we're in 2021. We're talking about tips for Kill Team for success.
Yes.
Hard to say coming from, guys over here who don't win shit, but I'm not even trying these days. But so my big thing, I know you said to keep this short and sweet, but I'm just gonna talk and you'll just have to edit it down or do whatever you do. But I'd say a big thing, obviously play games, right? Like, don't be afraid to play games. Like, go to your local store. Obviously you can't right now, or jump onto Tabletop Simulator and throw down. Just find somebody who's looking for a game and play a game. Try to kind of learn your faction. One of the things that I did that helped me a lot, and also helped me kind of figure out, maybe what faction I wanted to play next. I took the rule book and I went through it faction by faction, and I looked at everything that each faction could take. And like sometimes I was like, "What the hell? This team can do that!" Like, obviously we're on Tabletop Simulator right now, so everything is getting played. But in our local meta, like, I had never run up against Drukhari, and like Drukhari were this dreaded thing in EU, and this dreaded thing on, like, people were talking about them and they were up and coming, but I had never faced up against one until SoCal of last year.
Yeah.
I had just not seen them because we didn't have anybody who played them, so I wasn't sure what they 100% what they were capable of. Even after playing them, I wasn't, because that guy didn't do the things that a lot of people are doing with mandrakes and stuff.
Yeah.
And then when I started to look at him at the start of last year, when I was going through the book team by team, and I remember hitting you up and I was like, "Dude, Drukhari, what the hell is up with this team? Are you kidding me?"
Yep.
And we had a conversation about it, and we were both just like, "What the hell?"
Yeah. Do
All
you
this
even
stuff they
need
can
a
do.
sub faction with those?
Yeah. But just because that helps you be aware of what your opponent can do, right? Because if you're preparing and you're thinking about what you can do to, like, secure an objective or to take out models, or what your win conditions are, but you don't even know what the other team is capable of, and all of a sudden they pull off this tactic, or they pull off this move, or this unit can move 12 inches and you didn't know that, stuff like that is going to catch you off guard and make it a lot more difficult to get those win conditions. Like, you're thinking of a win condition, and maybe that win condition isn't even possible because the enemy team does something else, or that model has a 3+ invuln and you didn't know that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
or that
dude.
model has that little half squatling sniper on the Astra Militarum team is 2 wounds, and you didn't even realize. You know what I mean? That happened to me once. I cybolted it the first time I ever saw one. I cybolted it with a Grey Knight, and I was like, "Yes, only 1 wound down out of 2. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
things like that because I didn't know. So take a look through the rule book. Just if you're sitting watching football, it's Sunday right now, or if you're if you're a basketball fan, if you're sitting watching a game or something, just pull out the book, take a little look through it. And just read up. You don't have to go super extensive. You don't have to team build. I personally went through and looked at every single team and built. When I went through and looked at what they had, then I built what I thought would be a good rounded out roster. Not a roster, but like a team, just a single team. Like, okay, I think this would be good. You know what I mean? Like this is something I've seen before or whatever. In competition. So that's one big thing. And then the other big thing is if you can, like I said, play games, obviously. But find yourself, obviously, there's not, there's not Beeranids don't grow on trees. Ootsicles don't either. But we have a lot of good people in our community, and I'm sure there's a lot of good people in the tabletop simulator community, but also in your personal home communities once we do get back to playing in person. Find somebody that you can meet up with like every other week and play a game. And like when Beeranid, like we talk about how we play games together, but most of the time we don't even play full games. We set up a board and we look at like if we're getting ready for a tournament, for tournament prep, like we look at it, we set it up, then we pick like our team, and then we look at the board and we just talk about stuff. Like I'm like, what do you think if I put this here, if I do that? It's almost like chess. Like, well, if you do that, then I'm going to do this, and if you do this, then I'm going to do that. And we have these kinds of conversations that help you help us prepare for and give us an idea of like it's a lot easier to muster your team if you have an idea of what the other person's capable of. Like, do they have a veteran? Do they have a this? A lot of the games that Beeranid and I play, we don't even play full 4 rounds. Like we'll play like the first 2 rounds or something, and we'll even stop and we'll be like, oh, okay, wait, okay, so let me redo that move, and this time I'm going to do a charge instead of an advance. Let me see how it would have worked out. That situation would have worked out, or let me roll the dice. Even though I died in that combat, let me see if I'd survived what I would have done to you with my, to try to kind of play out multiple scenarios, how that turn or how that move could have gone.
Yeah.
And then also talk to your opponent. Like at the end of a game, if you're playing in TTS, if you're playing in person, whatever it is, don't just, shake hands or good game or whatever it is. Obviously don't shake hands right now, COVID, but, don't just say good game and move on. I mean, obviously if you're at a tournament, you don't generally have time for this, but on TTS and other things, you generally have time. Have like a post-mortem, you know what I mean? Talk about the game, what they did right, what you maybe did wrong, be open to criticism. Like, hey, ask your opponent, what could I have done differently, do you think? You know what I mean? Like, what do you think I could have done differently in this game? Should I have taken a different specialist? Should I have not deep striked that guy? Should I have done this? Should I have done that? Get some outside information. Even if people are sitting in Tabletop Simulator or in Discord watching your game, talk to those people. Get some information from them, like the popcorn gallery or whatever it is. Like those are all other players, right? And they're sitting there with an outside objective, looking at this game, not in the mindset of a player, right? When we're casting games, it's so easy to look at things and go like this, that, or the other, and then those players usually go back and they watch the stream and they're like, oh man, I didn't even think of that in that moment,
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff like that. So I mean, those are pretty basic. I mean, those sound like pretty basic things, but they're things that I don't see a lot of people do. Like, I mean, a lot of the people we play with are pretty, high level in that regard and do discuss those things. But just like when I was starting, a lot of people didn't, necessarily do that. I didn't do that myself, and that helped me. Like, the idea that you learn more from your losses than you do from your wins. Like, if you throw a team down and your team is just successful, whether it's the dice or whether it's whatever. Like, I look at my Grey Knights. That is a dice-heavy team. Like, my wins with them aren't necessarily wins that I earned. Like, my dice earned me those wins. You know what I mean? Like, maybe I made a wrong move, but my Cybolts made up for it, or whatever the case is, right? Necrons, maybe you got a reanimation or something like that. Still take a look at that game, and it's harder to do that when you win, because when you win, you're like, oh man, everything went right. Like, there's nothing I could have changed. But you still got to be, think of those things like, oh, even if that charge ended up working out, like, what's the reality that charge would have? If it's an 11-inch charge and you make it, you go, oh, great, but that probably might not have been the right move. So having somebody that you can play with on a normal basis who can see those things, like, Beeranid and I point stuff out to each other still, where we're like, dude, like, you do this kind of thing or you do that kind of thing.
Yep.
No,
there's no more valuable a resource for a kill team player that's in competitive than somebody who is willing to be completely transparent and doesn't really have an ulterior motive, like won't lead you astray for their own advantage or something like that. You know what I mean? Later on, like building a weakness into you or something like that. It's like, no, they
could you imagine We've just
The
like
long
you've been
game.
grooming me for a year
Yes.
to be like.
That was SCO because we did get paired up. But see, then
we
you
did
got
get
me.
paired up.
You got me at BAO. So
That was a terrible. That SCO match was so bad. We were both just so wiped out and just
Yeah.
done with that tournament at that point too. Like
I know. I think I
that
even
was-
like
that was-
stepped outside for a little bit because you had just come off stream
Yeah, I think
with
you
Holy.
did.
I was just like, just chill for
Oh
a minute,
yeah,
dude.
I was in
It's the
mad
last
like
game.
mad anxiety mode too. I was just like done. I was so done.
And I'm like, okay, you're feeling a little better. Okay, 20 cultists.
Yeah, I know. Great.
Just
That was
spring that on you.
But yeah, like we throw down teams against each other, we build stuff, we look at stuff, we talk about tactics. That was when we did prep before LVO too, when we had like 12 people over here or something like that, 10, 12 people, whatever throughout the day. Like a lot of games were just that, where people talking about stuff like, okay, what secondaries would you take? And like, yeah, to some degree, Beeranid and I, if we do prep like that, and then you end up facing that guy in a tournament, they're gonna have an idea of what happens.
Yeah.
That's what happened with me with LVO, right? I went up against Paul and his Necrons.
Yeah.
And we had done some prep together, and like those games had gone pretty, I'd say like 60-40 in his favor already. And I mean, he ended up winning at LVO too. Those Necrons are strong, but just sliced through my Grey Knights. But that's it's if you have that partner, Eric, the other Tau player, and then what's the guy that he played
Chuck?
with all the time? I can't think. Yeah, Chuck. They play a lot like that. I know Michael Holy played a lot against the Beeranid player that he lost to at LVO. I don't know
Miguel.
if they still
Yeah.
do, but Miguel and him played a lot. And then you got Alex Admech and Emmanuel play each other a lot. Shane and Ryan obviously play each other a lot and do a lot of prep together. So
Yeah.
finding somebody that you can just play games with and that is trying to help make each other better players, kind of thing. Looking at stuff objectively, and that is okay, not like actually playing a game, that can sit there and talk about it. And not everybody can do that, to be fair too, right? Like some people don't look at the game as tactically like that. Like they look at it like, people look at the game differently, right? And some people can talk that like that next level, like tactics or things like that, and can sit back there. And some people just want to throw down dice. They don't want to, have a post-mortem and do that. And I guess you got to be okay with that, right? If you play somebody and they don't want to have a discussion. But I'd say try to have that discussion. If you want to get better, if you and your opponent want to get better, have those conversations about things like that. Obviously, it's a little bit more difficult in the tournament or competitive games if you're trying to build your elo, but you can't talk. Like, you're not going to talk it out during the middle of a game. But if you're playing a casual game, play casual games. Don't always make it a tournament game or an ELO game. Play games where you can sit back and rewind it. Oh, like let's go back to the start of turn one. Move that model back. Let me see what would have happened if I did this. What would I, stuff like that.
Like on the other side of the table, it helps them too, right? Because it's like you
Yeah.
don't want it to be just like a breeze, So you're telling the opponent kind of what to do to make it to where you got to work for it a little bit, because now it's better prep for both of you. One thing while you're here, one thing that you did that was, I always thought was kind of impressive is like for a little bit there, you would go to work and on lunch or something, you would like devise a new, like it was a different faction per day pretty much. You were just going through that book for a little bit and just like, okay, this, and just looking at every faction.
Yeah, that was when part of that was me trying to figure out what my next faction was going to be, and part of it was just me wanting to know more about stuff, because I hate getting, like oh my gosh moments or gotcha moments, like when like I said with that, like with the squatling or with the whatever. And there's certain things that you play against more, right? Like Admech, I know enough about them because I played against Alex all the time in our local meta. Like your NIDs, I know a certain degree, but there's so much to know about NIDs. And it's like you look at a Stardays, like no matter how many times I read that book, I still don't know everything that a Stardays team can bring, because there's just too much. But just knowing the basics and having an idea, look into those other Discord channels, But yeah, that's what I did. I went through the book, and then like on my like I'd write down all the numbers and costs of things. Like once I went through and like I figured out like what was good, I'd write down those numbers, or I'd memorize them, whatever it was. Like, okay, Poxwalker, this is how much the the Great Cleaver costs, or this is how much a Grey Knight costs, this is how much a Grey Knight with twin blades costs, or whatever it is. And then I'd list build during my lunches, because I mean my work was pretty boring, and I just brought lunch every day, and I just sat there at my desk. because we only got 30-minute lunches. And yeah, I list built, or like in between, little things. Obviously, I don't work there anymore. But I would list build in between, like when I was done with my work and stuff, like if I was waiting for parts to be done or anything like that.
Yep.
I'd sit there and I'd just write down it. And it looked, the funny thing was, the greatest thing was, like, if I ever got caught, it was just gibberish to anybody. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
because I wasn't writing down full things. I wasn't writing down it was just like GK for Grey Knight. And then, like, you know what I mean? Like for Halberd, it was like H, or for, whatever, GKH, and then like, 19 for the points or whatever it was. And like, it was just a bunch of that, and then adding up the points. Like, if somebody looked at it, they would have been like, what the hell are you doing? Like, this is Rain Man shit, or,
Yeah.
what do you, and I would just be like, oh, just, doodling, or just, scribbling, or just, I was like calculating something in my head, like a time or parts, number of parts that I needed to order, something like that. So, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not telling you to, try to get away with stuff at work. I'm just saying, like, little things like that. But that's
How
also
to
how
get
my
paid
brain,
to build kill team lists.
yeah, but that's also just how my brain works, right? Like, I'm a mathematic person, or I'm a, like, this kind of person. Like, I like that list building, and I like just going through and figuring out, okay, what can I fit into 100 points? Okay, what does this do? What does this specialist bring to this team? What does this one bring? I mean, mind you, the Grey Knight roster is such an easy one to build because there's limited options. Like, I had like 4 or 5 slots at the end that I just like filled in with like random stuff that I never really would use.
Yep.
But
yeah.
But
great tips. Thank you to everybody who came on. This was the most ambitious kill team episode, or Killzone episode, that kind of has happened so far. And the kill team community, I put this idea out there, and it's just, the response has been so great. I know that there's more people that actually wanted to be on, but things came up, like the schedule just didn't work out, family emergency, this and that. Like, more people wanted to be on here than actually were, and it was just like, that's such a testament to the community. People, it's weird because you watch like a YouTube channel that's really on a fluffy narrative kind of play, and they have this totally negative view of competitive players just being these cutthroat piece of crap type people. And it's like, dude, no, this community is open. Nobody keeps secrets. Like, they will tell you exactly what's working and stuff. You just got to go out there and just listen to this again and again and again if you can, guys, those of you that are listening, because some of this is like peeled back the curtains. Like the Matt H thing, where he was talking about, don't be afraid to hold back turn one. You don't have to run onto an objective. That affected me. I think that's coming out like in games coming up and stuff. So it was like, that's, he's got a good point there. But yes, we look forward to, we thank you guys for giving us that first year. We look forward to another. It wouldn't be possible without you listeners. And thank you to all the guests that have come on this episode and last year's episode as we move into the second year. And we look forward to great things.
Yeah, and part of that's going to rely on what GW brings us this year, and part of that's just going to rely on us. So we'll, a little 50-50. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. So this has been Beeranid and
Utsuko,
and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Take care, everybody.
Adios.